And let us pray. Aramim ka Adonai kidi litani. Adonai Elohai laolam odeka amen. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Amen. This year during Lent, we are walking to Jerusalem. We are taking the time to count our steps, our strokes, our whatever it is. And at the same time, we are living into that great heritage of pilgrimage. We're reflecting on how it is that we see the world around us with God's eyes. Now, last week we began by looking out the door, standing on the doorstep, realizing it's a little scary out there sometimes, and remembering that God is our protector in our comings, in our goings, forever and ever. And so today, we begin our journey. We step out. We go where bold people have gone. And so today we walk alongside Peter and James and John as they go up a mountain with Jesus, right? Today's text came from Luke 9, and it's not normally a Lenten text. In fact, this morning when Jeff asked me what I was preaching on, and I said, I'm preaching on Transfiguration, he was like, that's a before Lent thing. Yes, it is. Usually, we read this text the week before Ash Wednesday, the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. It's the last week before we begin Lent. But as we were creating this series, as we were looking at pilgrimage, I couldn't help but add this travel, this journey, to a part of our study. Because what better story could show the power of experiencing God on the road than the Transfiguration? There are others, but we'll get there later. Turn the page. Here we go. So let's take a step back and think about this text that John read. Jesus takes Peter and James and John up a mountain to pray, which is, somewhat fairly normal for Jesus to go and pray. So they're like, okay, no big deal. And then all of a sudden, Jesus' face starts shining bright white and he's flashing. I refer to this as shiny Jesus. Right? That's a little less normal. A little abnormal, but that's okay, whatever. And then all of a sudden we have Moses, the symbolic person of the law. And we have Elijah, one of the major prophets, standing there and talking to Jesus about his departure, which in the original language is actually closer to his exodus, which is always interesting. At which point in time we now say, is this a business as usual kind of day? I don't really think so. We don't often see Moses and Elijah and shiny Jesus all at the same time. So, okay, it's all good. I suspect that Peter, James, and John were a little tired. They were a little worn out. They don't hike in the mountains as much as maybe they ought to, because they almost missed all of these crazy things happening. They almost missed it because they needed a nap, but they didn't. They managed to stay awake long enough to at least grasp a little bit about what's going on, and then, and I really suspect it's because Peter was doing his very best to not fall asleep, that Peter steps in it, because Peter does that occasionally, and he says, Jesus, this is an amazing thing that's happening. What if we built 3 shrines? You get one, Moses gets one, Elijah gets one, and then we can stay and we can hang out with Moses and Elijah, and it will be amazing and awesome and wonderful. And in the meantime, a cloud has descended on the mountaintop, and a divine public announcement system divinely makes sure that everyone knows that Jesus is the Son of God, who makes God happy, and we should listen. Key here, right? And in the midst of all of this, Moses and Elijah disappear, and we're like, okay, cool. That just happened now, didn't it? I have to say, I love the story of the Transfiguration. Some of it's because I'm a liturgical nerd, and those really fun Sundays that nobody else remembers are really kind of exciting for me. But I also love all of the Easter eggs that are hidden in this story. You know the concept of Easter eggs, right? You're looking and watching a movie, and all of a sudden there's a reference to something that's totally not in that movie. It's seeing Buzz Lightyear in the middle of Cars or something like that. The Easter eggs in this story just keep going and going and going. We're talking about Jesus' exodus. oh, well, that ties in. And there's Moses, and there's Elijah, okay, and there's a voice from heaven, okay, on and on and on, the layers in this story, the connections to the Old Testament, to the Gospels, over and over and over. It helps us to understand that there are so many different lessons in this one story, which is why I can preach on it year after year after year. But as we're looking at pilgrimage this year, as we're looking at holy travel, I thought two things in particular really stand out. First, we have Jesus, we have Peter, we have James, and we have John, and every single one of them is changed by their experience in this journey, right? Jesus is literally changed. He appears different. In some ways, Jesus takes on the divinity that he owns in a new way for new eyes in this space. But Peter, James, and John get to tell that story. They get to be the people who later on go down the mountain and say, much, much later, you know, this crazy thing happened when we were up praying. You know, we get changed by the journey too. We change every day, and when we experience faith and when we don't. If you're not quite sure about, think about it. Where were you last year? Or perhaps even more profoundly, where were you 5 years ago when the world was locking down? We are all different today. We are different because of COVID. We are different because we have become one. Where two congregations who were struggling in their own ways came together to be so much stronger, led by faith. And so what we do is we take the time to see God in the midst. Pilgrimage is traveling intentionally. When we intentionally look at who we are and the people we are and the way that God reaches out to us, we experience faith and life in a whole new way, and it changes us. So that's the first point. Second point, Peter's gut reaction to shiny Jesus is to memorialize that location, right? We need 3 shrines, Jesus. One for you, one for Elijah, one for Moses. We do that a lot. We memorialize locations. And yet they still went down the mountain. Jesus didn't have to drag Peter, James, and John kicking and screaming. They all went down the mountain and they continued on with life. We all have locations that hold that piece of our heart, right? For some people, it's camp. For some people, it's a church building. For some people, it's that place where they experienced God in a way that they had never experienced God before. For me, it's the chapels both at my university and at my seminary. Very different chapels. One's very high Catholic, and the other one literally is designed to look like a train station. It's also the center of a labyrinth. Doesn't matter which one, just any center. Or anywhere nearing moving water. These are the spaces that I hold dear. These places hold that for us. But they also invite us to continue on the journey. If we stay in one spot, we don't go forth changed. If we stay in one spot, we root in ways that are not perhaps helpful. So if we put the two together, if we understand that we are traveling and we are seeing God and we are changed, and in the intentionality of pilgrimage, we see and experience things and move on to honor that space and to say that this journey is worthwhile, I think there's a new power in the transfiguration, right? It's the understanding that we are the people of God on a journey together. And we share our stories, and we share our faith. And when we experience one another, we see shiny Jesus, and we are changed. So this day, as we journey, as we walk from Michigan to wherever else it is that we will go. Let us be the church that welcomes it in, that says with open arms, I am a child of God and I am changed by the journey. And there are spots that hold my heart and my soul, and they encourage me to continue to go on and on and on until we reach our destination. Amen.